On the day I came of age at 15, father told me to toss an embroidered silk ball to choose a husband. To ensure I married a worthy man, every man allowed to compete for the silk ball was carefully selected by father. Only those with an invitation could enter the venue. On the very same day, the emperor and his noble consort left the palace in plain clothes. The noble consort Shenrong found the whole affair amusing. So she ordered her hidden guards to drag a beggar from the street corner into the crowd and even helped him catch the silk ball. The beggar had no invitation, so father naturally refused to recognize him as his son-in-law, yet Shenrong immediately revealed her identity then and there. Leveraging the emperor's authority, she forced me to marry the beggar. The beggar rose to wealth and power overnight. He acted tyrannically, relying on the imperial marriage decree. Not only did he drive father to his death in a fit of rage, but he also pushed me down the attic when I was heavy with child. Reborn. To this very day, I looked at Shenrong, who was dressed in men's clothing in the audience below, and resolutely threw the silk ball to the emperor standing beside her. This time, I will seize all the glory and wealth. I will also claim their lives. 1. My last memory of the previous life was this: Zhongda, dead drunk, was embracing a courtesan in his arms. He brazenly climbed onto my bed and even said he wanted me to serve him together with the courtesan. I refused, and even slapped him across the face. Enraged beyond reason, Zhongda pushed me off the attic, seeing blood gushing from between my legs. He did not even bother to call a physician. Instead, he punched me again and again. Who do you think you are? The emperor decreed this marriage, and the noble consort acted as matchmaker. Even if you are an official's daughter, you can only stay with me, a beggar, and be my woman for the rest of your life. If you dare to disobey me, I'll beat you to death. His face twisted into a ferocious grimace as he tried to vent his pent-up resentment in this brutal way. In my final moments before death, I summoned strength from nowhere, pulled the golden hairpin from my bun, and stabbed it fiercely into his neck. If I had to die, then we would die together. I only felt a flicker of unwillingness, and those two chief culprits, if heaven had eyes, I wished they would burn in hell together with him. 2. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the very day of the silk ball marriage selection. Father handed the embroidered silk ball to me. Just like in my previous life, his eyes glistened with tears as he spoke softly. Owen, may you find a good husband and live a smooth and happy life. Seeing father again, I was in a daze for a moment. This little old man with graying hair was no more than a minor official under the emperor's rule in the capital, yet he had lavished all his love on me, never letting me suffer the slightest hardship, even for my marriage selection. He had followed the custom of my mother's hometown, erecting a decorated tower and letting me toss the silk ball to choose a husband, for it was in this very way that my mother had thrown her silk ball to father all those years ago. The two of them had been deeply in love for most of their lives. Even after mother passed away suddenly, father never took another wife or concubine. He focused all his energy on raising me up. Afraid that I might toss the silk ball to a bad man, he had carefully inspected and selected a small number of invitations over half a year, sending them only to handsome and talented young men in the capital. In this way, no matter who caught my silk ball, I would be able to live a safe and prosperous life. But fate, as always, played a cruel trick. Pulling my thoughts back to the present, my gaze swept over the crowd below, finally landing on Shenrong, who was watching the fun not far away. This was the most favored noble consort in the imperial palace. Everyone said she was innocent and bold. Even though she held a lofty position, she always stood up for those of humble status. I stared at her, and she lifted her eyes to meet mine, a glint of amusement in her eyes. After locking eyes for a long while, she suddenly called over one of her hidden guards. The guard leaned down to listen to her whispered instructions, then vanished without a trace. Watching the guard leave, Shenrong slowly raised her head again and gave me a brilliant smile from her spot below the tower. In my previous life, I had not understood the meaning behind that smile. I had simply followed the rules. When the auspicious hour arrived, I tossed the silk ball in my hand, but the silk ball, which should have fallen to the ground, suddenly veered off course like a kite with a broken string, swaying unsteadily in the air before crashing directly into the beggar huddled in the corner. The beggar had no invitation, so father naturally refused to acknowledge him as his son-in-law, for there had been a clear rule from the very beginning. Only those holding an invitation were allowed to catch the silk ball at my Yi family's marriage selection. Yet it was at this moment that Shenrong stepped forward. She revealed her identity. And together with the young man standing silently beside her, whom everyone recognized as the emperor, the crowd fell to their knees in a sea of prostrations, using the excuse that the emperor had witnessed the whole scene and that no one dared to deceive the Son of Heaven. Shenrong forced me to accept this marriage arrangement. She said to me, "All common people under heaven are equal. Since Miss Yi chose to toss the silk ball to select a husband, then whoever catches it is your fate. As a respectable official's daughter, do you look down on a beggar and feel ashamed of marrying him?" With that, she looked at the emperor beside her with a coquettish smile. "Your Majesty, do you think this pair makes a good match?" The emperor nodded his head, though he did not speak a word. It was tantamount to agreeing with her. Thus, this marriage became an imperial decree, but Zhongda had been a beggar for decades, even after washing his face clean. He was somewhat of a handsome young man, but in the end, he was idle and useless. With wealth and power suddenly at his fingertips, he became arrogant and conceited beyond measure. Not only did he frequent brothels every night, but he also relied on the imperial marriage decree to bring a courtesan to father's 60th birthday banquet, ultimately driving father to his death in a fit of anger. Yet even with such atrocious behavior, Shenrong dismissed it with a laugh. It must be that the Yi family did not treat this son-in-law well enough, making Zhongda feel wronged. That is why he caused such a disaster. With the noble consort speaking up for him, Zhongda not only escaped punishment but even put on 3 catties of weight during his brief stay in prison. It was not until the very end, when I lay dying at his hands, that Zhongda finally told me the truth. When you tossed the silk ball to choose a husband, the noble consort had never seen such a marriage custom before, so she had me dragged into the crowd and ordered her hidden guards to help me catch the silk ball, all just to see your reaction. That is why no matter how I treated you, she would always take my side. As for the reason behind it all, it was simply that Shenrong had never seen such a marriage selection before. Thus, an evil thought had crossed her mind. She wondered if an official's daughter, having been forced to marry a beggar, would either hang herself with a white silk ribbon in tears or live a miserable life of lingering on in the face of overwhelming power. She had turned my life into a stage play, seeking nothing but her own amusement. This time, she chose to do the exact same thing. The drowsy Zhongda was dragged into the corner of the venue just like before. But the decorated tower was bustling with noise and excitement at this moment. Everyone's eyes were fixed on me. Therefore, no one noticed Zhongda's presence at all. 3. Miss, the auspicious hour has arrived. It is time for you to toss the silk ball, the nanny whispered, supporting me as I walked to the railing, then silently stepped back a few paces. I held the embroidered silk ball tightly in my arms, but unlike in my previous life, where I had blushed shyly and tossed it immediately, I fixed my gaze on Shenrong not far away. She was pulling the man beside her, Zhu Chengxian, and had directly snatched an invitation from a passing young master. With the help of her hidden guards, they swaggered into the venue in a grand manner. In my previous life, I had vaguely noticed this chaotic scene, but my full attention had been focused on the silk ball all the while. Now that I had been reborn to this crucial moment, I had no choice but to take a gamble. I clutched the silk ball in my arms. As Zhu Chengxian drew closer and closer, I pretended to toss the silk ball in the opposite direction. Everyone present rushed over there in unison, and even the hidden guards who had received their orders had their attention diverted. At that very moment, I quickly threw the silk ball straight into Zhu Chengshuan's arms. Since this was a silk ball marriage selection, I had naturally been taught the skills of tossing the ball by a master long ago. I could aim accurately and throw it into the arms of whomever I favored. What was more, I was throwing the silk ball to Zhu Chengxian himself. Even if the hidden guards lying in ambush wanted to intervene, if they had used pebbles to hit the silk ball, there was a tiny chance that the pebbles might hit Zhu Chengxian instead, and they would never dare to do that. Therefore, he was destined to catch this silk ball. After a long while, Zhu Chengxian lowered his eyes to look at the silk ball in his arms, a flash of astonishment in his eyes. I quickly looked at father. He also noticed my gaze and immediately ordered the family servants to go down and surround Zhu Chengxian. He was only a minor official who had never laid eyes on the emperor in his entire life, so he felt no fear at all. He simply shouted at the top of his voice, "My worthy son-in-law." Shen Rong stood right beside Zhu Chengxian. She was equally caught off guard by this sudden turn of events with the silk ball. When she finally recovered her senses, her face turned extremely ugly. She hastily snatched the silk ball from Zhu Chengshuan's hand and threw it violently onto the ground. The silk ball rolled to Zhong Die's feet. Shen Rong quickly shouted, "The beggar has snatched the silk ball. This young lady should marry the beggar." Father led me down from the tower, walking straight up to Zhu Chengxian. He glanced at Shen Rong with a hint of dissatisfaction in his eyes. Even if Zhu Chengxian was unwilling to marry me, he should not have said that I should marry a beggar. If he had to choose between the two, father would naturally choose Zhu Chengxian. "Young master," father said, "I do not recall sending you an invitation. But regardless, according to the rules of today's event, the silk ball has already fallen into this young master's hands. Even if you snatch the silk ball and throw it to someone else, it will be of no avail." Shen Rong had been showered with endless favors in the imperial palace. No one had ever dared to reprimand her like this before. Overwhelmed by a sense of grievance, she was about to open her mouth to call her hidden guards, planning to have my entire family killed on the spot. I quickly stepped forward and curtsied to them with a graceful smile. "Since this young master has caught my silk ball, according to the rules of today's marriage selection, you are now my husband-to-be." As I spoke, a gentle breeze blew past, and the veil covering my face was blown to the ground. I do not." Zhu Chengxian, who had been resisting fiercely just a moment ago, froze in astonishment the instant he saw my face. He could not even finish his words of refusal. In my previous life, I had always abided by the rules and never removed my veil. It was not until the emperor's final decree was issued and everything was settled that Zhong Die roughly tore my veil off. Zhu Chengxian, who was just about to leave, caught sight of my face, and his eyes were filled with undisguised admiration and a hint of regret. But the emperor's words were imperial edicts, there was no taking them back. Therefore, this time, I was determined to take the initiative to remove my veil and let Zhu Chengxian see my face. I had inherited the gentle and graceful features of my mother, a woman from the Jiangnan region. When my eyes glistened with tears, I always looked particularly pitiful and endearing. Just like now, I looked at Zhu Chengxian with misty eyes. "Young master, are you unwilling to marry me?" "Of course he is unwilling." Shen Rong cut in sharply, stepping forward to shield Zhu Chengxian protectively. Her gaze fixed on me was filled with such hatred. And the words that came out of her mouth were equally harsh. "You are clearly an official's daughter, how can you be so shameless, eagerly rushing to choose a husband for yourself? What if he already has a wife? Would you even be willing to be his concubine? Or is it that you look down on that beggar? Little do you know that in the emperor's heart, all people under heaven are equal. Your disdain for a beggar truly reveals your vicious heart." I lowered my eyes. Hiding the hatred burning deep in my heart, she let out a soft chuckle and went on, "Throwing the silk ball to choose a husband, this was all destined by heaven from the start. If this young master already has a legal wife, I will still enter his mansion as promised, even if I have to be his concubine. I will never break my word." What a woman of her word. "Miss Yi, to attend a silk ball selection, one must have received an invitation and come here voluntarily. If this young master is unwilling to marry Miss Yi, then why did he come today? Miss Yi is so reasonable. And this young master is so handsome, don't be an ungrateful man." The other young masters who had failed to catch the silk ball, stirred by my words, also began to speak up in my defense one after another. Only those with invitations were allowed inside, allowed to catch the silk ball. That was why, in my past life, Zhong Die had been sneaked in. He had never held an invitation at all. By the rules, we could have refused to acknowledge him. But Shen Rong had gone out of her way to grab 2 invitations. Even if the names on them were wrong, there were many young men present, including sons of noble families. And so, this young master, isn't he His Majesty the current emperor? A sudden gasp rang out from the crowd. The murmur of discussions instantly swelled into a roar, then everyone knelt down in obeisance, shouting "Long live your majesty" over and over again, directly confirming Zhu Chengshuan's identity beyond any doubt. Shunrong's face turned ashen, forced by the eyes of the crowd. Even Zhu Chengxian had to steel himself and look at me. I was not among those with invitations, yet by a twist of fate, I caught your silk ball. Though I have no empress, I cannot promise you the position of legal wife. Are you still willing to marry me? I knelt prostrate on the ground, looking up at Zhu Chengxian, and said each word clearly and firmly. Throwing a silk ball to find a husband is a marriage destined by heaven. Your humble servant is willing to submit to heaven's will. I wonder, will your majesty also submit to heaven's will? I did not answer his question. Instead, I tossed it right back to him. Because I was a woman, if I had said outright that I was willing to enter the palace, everyone would have called me greedy for glory and wealth. But if I had said I was unwilling, the silk ball was now in Zhong Die's hands, and Shenrong would never have let me off the hook, so my answer had to be ambiguous. Leaving the final choice to Zhu Chengxian, as the ruler of a nation, he had disrupted a subject's daughter's marriage. If he gave no explanation, it would arouse the resentment of all the daughters of officials under heaven. You are merely the daughter of an 8th-rank official, your status is so lowly. What right do you have to enter the palace? Shenrong spat out the words hatefully, completely forgetting that just a moment ago, she had been saying that in the eyes of an emperor, all people under heaven were equal. Her eagerness to belittle me now only made many people present who knew her identity frown in disapproval. Though she is a noble consort, her status is indeed unparalleled. But dressing as a man and disrupting a silk ball selection, then turning around to say Miss Yi is of lowly birth, she is being far too domineering. Absolutely. Word has long spread in the capital that concubine Shun in the palace treats her servants equally and is an excellent mistress. Truly, seeing is believing, she is nothing but a hypocrite. The voices of those muttering were soft, and with so many people present, it was impossible to tell who was speaking. Shenrong's face turned bright red with anger. She raised her hand, ready to slap me. I did not dodge at all, because someone would stop her. At the very least, under the watchful eyes of everyone, Zhu Chengxian would never allow her to run amok again. Ronga, stop making a scene. Zhu Chengxian snapped at her in a low voice. Shenrong's eyes immediately filled with tears. Has your majesty taken a fancy to Miss Yi's beauty? Does he really intend to take her as a concubine? Your majesty rules over all the lands under heaven. Naturally, all the women in the world are at your majesty's disposal. Why must your ladyship be so angry? A woman must abide by the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. She must never harbor jealousy. I spoke softly, watching as her expression grew even more unsightly, as if she wanted nothing more than to kill me. Who do you think you are? How could His Majesty possibly take a fancy to you? You're just the daughter of a petty official who resorted to trickery to throw your silk ball to His Majesty. And now you actually think you can climb the social ladder and become a phoenix? Her tone was dripping with sarcasm. But Zhu Chengxian was an emperor after all, behind closed doors. He might have indulged Shenrong's whims, but with everyone watching, Zhu Chengxian valued his dignity above all else. If he backed down in the face of a woman's tantrum, he would be laughed at by all his subjects, who would say that a mighty emperor was actually afraid of his concubine. Furthermore, allowing his concubine to insult a court official's daughter without retort would only chill the hearts of his ministers. And so, Zhu Chengshuan's face darkened instantly. I caught her silk ball. Taking her as a concubine is my right. What's wrong with that? Fine. Then go marry Miss Yi. Never come to see me again. Shenrong had never expected that Zhu Chengxian would not only refuse to humor her but also humiliate her in front of everyone. Trapped in an awkward position, she simply wiped her tears and ran away. Zhu Chengshuan's face was grim, but with everyone watching, he had to give me an answer. After a moment of silence, he untied an exquisitely crafted jade pendant from his waist. He handed the pendant to me. Since I caught your silk ball in front of all these witnesses, refusing to take you as a concubine would surely damage your reputation. So, take this jade pendant as a token. In 3 days, an imperial edict will be delivered to the Yi mansion to escort you into the palace. I smiled faintly. reached out to take the jade pendant, and kowtowed to thank him according to the rules. Your humble servant kowtows to thank your majesty for his great grace. This time, I will have the glory and wealth, and I will have their lives too. 4. The 3-day deadline passed in the blink of an eye. As the reigning emperor, Zhu Chengxian naturally had to keep his word, but Shenrong was the apple of his eye. No matter how annoyed he was with her, her tears always softened his heart. So to appease Shenrong, I was only granted the title of Select Lady, a 7th-rank concubine. I was assigned to Tingxue Pavilion, the residence farthest from the emperor's sleeping quarters, with only 2 maids to attend to me utterly devoid of favor. Looking at the shabby and messy Tingxue Pavilion before her, Boyun, who had grown up with me since childhood, wore a look of deep worry on her face. Miss, to be treated with such contempt as soon as you enter the palace, it's clear our days ahead will be hard. I smiled and patted her hand. We didn't come into the palace without expecting this, did we? Just take it easy, there will be plenty of trouble to stir up in the days to come. My guess was spot on. Boyun had just finished cleaning the bedroom with the 2 young maids when Shenrong stormed over. She ordered her servants to kick open the gate of Tingxue Pavilion, and strode in without a word, slapping me hard across the face. "Ewn, you really are cunning, unwilling to marry a beggar. You set your sights on climbing the imperial ladder instead," she sneered, lifting my chin with her nail guard, her eyes filled with undisguised loathing. "But I'll show you how a shallow woman like you dies in this cutthroat imperial palace where people are swallowed up without a trace." I smiled back at her, not showing the slightest hint of fear in the face of her threats. "In that case, this concubine will wait for that day to come." She let out a cold snort and turned to leave, not forgetting to kick the already rickety gate of Tingxue Pavilion as she went, making it creak even more precariously on its hinges. Boyun quickly pulled a jar of ointment from her bundle and began to dab at the red swelling on my face. "Shenrong is so domineering. It's a good thing we brought plenty of medicine with us before coming here. Miss, just endure it for now, we have a long way to go. Fortune favors the bold someday, our luck will turn." I nodded, gazing out the window at the scenery. Today was my first day in the palace. By unwritten rule, the emperor should have summoned me to his bedchamber, but he did not come. Instead, he went straight to Shenrong's Guanzhou palace. "I've already sent someone to inquire." The noble consort sang a little tune in the imperial garden, the same one she sang when she first met His Majesty, reminded him of their old feelings, and His Majesty just. Boyun's voice trailed off, but I knew what she meant, and I did not feel the slightest hint of anger. Today was my first day in the palace, and Shenrong hated me so much of course she would find a way to steal my chance at the emperor's favor, because in this deep palace, a concubine without favor could sometimes live a life harder than that of a maid. 5. I would never sit idly by and wait for my fate to unfold. The next day, according to palace rules, I had to go to Chenxian Palace to pay my respects to the imperial noble consort. The imperial noble consort's maiden name was Shu Ruoxuan. She was the 2nd legitimate daughter of the Empress Dowager's family, Zhu Chengshuan's blood-related cousin. Originally, it was supposed to be the Shu family's eldest legitimate daughter who entered the palace to become empress, but fate is unpredictable. The eldest daughter died suddenly, and the position of empress could no longer go to the Shu family. After consulting with the clan elders, the Shu family sent Shu Ruoxuan, who had already been betrothed to another family, into the palace. Since entering the palace, her health had never been good. She was sickly all day long and rarely received visitors. Today, I was here only to pay my respects according to the rules. Shu Ruoxuan sat on the main seat and gave me a reward as per the custom. But before I could thank her, Shenrong walked in. She did not even bother to curtsy to Shu Ruoxuan. Striding straight over to me and stepping on my hand with her foot, smiling triumphantly. "Coming here to curry favor with the imperial noble consort so early in the morning, do you really think she cares about you? Or is it that you think the title of Select Lady is too lowly? So you're trying to suck up to her to climb the ranks and become a noble?" My hand throbbed with pain, but I did not move. Instead, I slowly lifted my head, looking past Shenrong's foot at Shu Ruoxuan before me. Shu Ruoxuan's face was twisted with anger, and there was a flash of rage in her eyes, but in the end, she said nothing at all. For a woman who held the position of imperial noble consort to be reduced to this, one could see just how much Zhu Chengxian doted on Shenrong, to have spoiled her into such a willful and arrogant temperament. I remember the first time I met your ladyship, you said that all people under heaven are equal, and told me not to look down on beggars. At that time, I thought you were a woman with a strong sense of justice, that even those of lowly birth would never be easily humiliated by you. But seeing you today, I realize I was being far too naive. I was deliberately mocking her hypocrisy, her double standards. Shenrong could naturally hear the sarcasm in my words. She was a woman with a fiery temper, and this only made her fly into a rage. She picked up a teacup from the table, ready to throw it at me. You lowly bitch. Who gave you the right to mock me? I had been prepared for this. I quickly dodged to the side, and the teacup brushed past my shoulder, smashing to the ground. Enraged by this, Shenrong grabbed a vase from the side and hurled it at my head, but she failed to notice that I was standing right beside Shu Ruoxuan at that moment. When the vase came flying, it would easily hit Shu Ruoxuan standing next to me. Witnessing this, I didn't hesitate for a second. I spun around and shielded Shu Ruoxuan with my body, letting the vase smash hard against my back. The sudden turn of events took Shu Ruoxuan by surprise too. She quickly reached out to pull me aside, then ordered her servants to block Shenrong's path. Her eyes blazed with unmasked anger. Noble consort Shen, you've gone too far. Seeing that Shu Ruoxuan was protecting me, Shenrong's face twisted into a sneer. I have gone too far, so what? What can you do to me? Truly, utterly arrogant. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Zhu Chengxian approaching the room. I immediately raised my voice. Your ladyship, the noble consort, even if you are the emperor's most favored, the harem has its own hierarchy of respect. There is no reason for you to resort to violence. I just did resort to violence. And you, Shenrong was not the least bit afraid. She let out a cold laugh, about to hurl more insults. When she suddenly spotted Zhu Chengxian, her arrogant, triumphant expression instantly melted into one of grievance. Your Majesty, the newly admitted lady Yi has insulted your servant, and the imperial noble consort even spoke up for her. I cannot go on living. Her ability to turn black into white was truly remarkable, but I was also quite skilled at using tears to win sympathy, so I immediately collapsed to the ground, tears pooling in my eyes, and inadvertently exposed the wound on my back. Looking utterly pitiful and helpless, why must you twist the truth so? Your ladyship, if you are angry with me for offending you earlier, you could have punished me in private however you saw fit. Why drag the imperial noble consort into this? The light-colored robe I wore today had already been torn by the impact, and the blood soaking through the fabric was more than enough proof that I had been wronged. Shu Ruoxuan had always been in poor health and had never enjoyed the emperor's favor. She had long resented Shenrong for her constant overstepping of boundaries, and when she saw the blood on my back, she was so enraged that she coughed up a mouthful of blood on the spot. Shu Ruoxuan fainted suddenly, throwing the entire Chengxian palace into chaos. Some servants rushed out immediately to summon the imperial physician. I looked at her pale face, then quickly took out the sachet I always carried with me. From it, I retrieved a pill I had cherished for a long time and stuffed it into Shu Ruoxuan's mouth. What did you give the imperial noble consort to eat? Don't you know how frail her health is? If you've given her the wrong medicine, can you bear the consequences? Shenrong's words sounded like a reprimand. But there was a glint of amusement in her eyes. She was clearly hoping that the wrong medicine would cause some kind of trouble for Shu Ruoxuan, so that there would be no one left in the palace with a higher rank than her. But she would never get her wish, because Shu Ruoxuan woke up very soon. As soon as she opened her eyes, she said, Your Majesty, noble consort Shen has repeatedly offended me, and she almost injured your servant just now. Now she has the audacity to twist the truth and falsely accuse both your servant and Lady Yi. I implore your Majesty to uphold justice and punish noble consort Shen. On one side was his frail cousin who never meddled in palace affairs. On the other side was his favorite consort, whom he knew full well was arrogant and domineering. Zhu Chengxian must have already made up his mind, But he was unwilling to punish Shenrong, so he could only beat around the bush, finally turning the topic to me. He asked, "Lady Yi, what kind of medicine did you give the imperial noble consort? When my father was young, he saved a man's life. Unable to repay the favor, the man left this pill behind, saying it has miraculous healing properties, so powerful that it can save even someone on the verge of death. It truly was a miracle drug, and there was only this one pill left, more precious than gold itself. It is so precious," Shu Ruoxuan said, looking at me with a hint of curiosity and scrutiny in her eyes. "Why did you spare it for me?" I smiled and shook my head. "Though this pill is rare and valuable, it only lives up to its name as a miracle drug if it is used to save a life, so whether it is used to save mine, or to save yours, it makes no difference." After I finished speaking, a look of approval appeared in Shu Ruoxuan's eyes. Even Zhu Chengxian, who had been silent beside her, could not help but fix his gaze on my face. It was Shenrong who was left out in the cold. She was so angry that she almost bit through her silver teeth in frustration. 6. After all, I had saved Shu Ruoxuan's life. Zhu Chengxian issued an imperial edict, promoting me to the rank of talent, and assigning several more palace maids and eunuchs to serve me. When Boyun learned about this, she did not look happy at all. Instead, a cold sweat broke out on her forehead, and she muttered anxiously, "Miss, that move was far too risky. You deliberately provoked the noble consort into losing her temper and acting out of line, and then took the opportunity to win the imperial noble consort's favor. But that pill was incredibly precious. Why did you really have to give it away? What had happened today had indeed been part of my plan all along." Shu Ruoxuan was an innocent person, and her health was so fragile. Giving her that pill not only allowed me to make a good impression on Zhu Chengxian, but also saved her life and earned me a valuable ally. It was truly killing 3 birds with 1 stone. I was about to say something more to Boyun when another eunuch arrived with an imperial message, saying that Zhu Chengxian would come to Tingxue Pavilion after his evening meal, and that I should prepare to receive him. I glanced at Boyun. As my most trusted confidant, she knew exactly what she needed to do at this moment, now that I had entered the palace. Serving the emperor in his bedchamber was inevitable, but what kind of women had Zhu Chengxian not seen before? If I wanted to truly win his heart, or gain his absolute favor, I had to have a few tricks up my sleeve that no one else possessed. So when he arrived at Tingxue Pavilion, what he saw was a room filled with misty smoke. Behind the folding screen stood a large bathtub, and the moment he stepped inside, I slowly rose from the water. "EWN," Zhu Chengxuan's voice was slightly hoarse. Through the hazy screen, the sound of water rippling as I stood up was infinitely tempting. "Your Majesty has come, Tilda." My voice was soft and sweet, laced with a deliberate hint of coquetry. Zhu Chengxian grunted in response, then slowly walked inside. At the same time, I picked up the sheer silk robe hanging beside the tub and draped it over my body. A few drops of water still clung to my collarbones. I walked barefoot over to him, smiling coquettishly. "Your servant intended to finish bathing before receiving your Majesty. I did not expect your Majesty to come so early. I was not even prepared." Zhu Chengxian was no fool when it came to romance. At this moment, at least, his eyes were dark and unfathomable, his gaze lingering on my body. Then he slowly reached out and touched my cheek, his fingers trailing down my neck until they brushed gently over the water droplets on my collarbone. "Wanna, you are so beautiful," he murmured. "I have not come to see you these past few days. It was my negligence." I shook my head, then stood on tiptoe and slowly wrapped my arms around his neck. "It is enough that you have come now. If only, your Majesty." A eunuch's voice suddenly interrupted me from the doorway. "Someone from Guanzhou Palace has sent word saying that the noble consort is unwell." The moment those words were spoken, I watched as Zhu Chengxian, who had been on the verge of losing control, snapped back to his senses instantly. I released him without hesitation, taking 2 steps back, and resumed my usual considerate and understanding demeanor. "Since the noble consort is unwell, your Majesty should go see her at once." By speaking up before he could say he was leaving, I ensured that he would leave feeling a sense of guilt toward me. He would think of me as sensible and understanding, and in comparison, someone else would seem all the more unreasonable. Winning hearts and minds was a long game, but what I ultimately wanted was worth the wait, so I could be patient. Before Zhu Chengxian left, he reached out and pinched my cheek gently. "Wana is such a good girl. I will come to see you again tomorrow." With that, he left in a hurry, resolute and without hesitation. I watched his retreating figure until it disappeared completely at the end of the corridor. The tenderness in my eyes faded away, leaving only bone-chilling hatred in its place. 7. Shenrong was, after all, the woman who held his heart. Bringing her down so quickly would not be an easy task. I was in no hurry, I was simply waiting for the right opportunity. So when we ran into each other head-on in the Imperial Garden, she wasted no time in mocking me. "The Emperor went to your place." "Did he?" But all I had to do was say my head hurt, and he came to see me anyway. "EWN, so what if you are beautiful?" In the Emperor's heart, there will only ever be me. Faced with her provocation, I did not retort this time. Instead, I looked at her with a bright, smiling face. "You are absolutely right. Your ladyship." Shenrong looked as if she had just punched a pillow. All her strength had been wasted. She was angry, but there was nothing she could do to vent it. In the end, she just lifted her chin and looked down at me. "EWN, I took an instant dislike to you the moment I saw you. Now that you've entered the palace, you are destined to grow old and die alone." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of an elegant, regal figure not far away. I immediately cleared my throat, assuming a demure and dignified posture. A woman should always abide by the rules of virtue and propriety. If I fail to win the Emperor's favor, it is my own fault. From now on, I will be even more diligent and self-reliant, striving to share your ladyship's burdens. My sudden change of tone left Shenrong staring at me in confusion, but with so many eyes watching, especially in such a busy, gossip-ridden place as the Imperial Garden, she could not punish me without reason. Finally, she lost interest. Before she left, she deliberately bumped into me. Sending me stumbling to the ground, she let out a soft laugh, then swayed her hips and walked away from me. Boyun quickly helped me up from the ground, her eyes filled with worry. I smiled at her. "Don't worry, I'm fine. Fine, you just got bullied again. Your ladyship, you are far too soft-hearted. You should have reported this to the Imperial noble consort and asked her to stand up for you." Boyun muttered under her breath, then added, "Just a few days ago, the noble consort even threw a vase at you. Your back injury hasn't even healed yet." I chuckled softly, still looking as gentle and unassuming as a chrysanthemum. It was not until the elegant figure in the distance had left that Boyun and I exchanged a glance, both of us letting out a small sigh of relief. Then we turned around and headed back to Tingxue Pavilion. On the way back, Boyun leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Miss, why did you tell me to say those things? Is there some deeper meaning behind it?" I smiled mysteriously. "You'll find out within the hour." 8. An hour later. Shenrong, the most favored noble consort in the entire harem, was punished by the emperor with 3 days of confinement to her palace. The reason: arrogance and tyranny, and a complete lack of female virtue. Boyun's face was filled with curiosity. So I took out the album that father had given me before I entered the palace. The small book was filled with portraits of countless nobles and high-ranking officials. Among them was the portrait of the Grand Princess. She was the current emperor's own aunt. She had once followed the late emperor to fight and unify the country, and had been left disabled as a result. Zhu Chengxian held this aunt in the highest respect, and the Grand Princess was known for being rigid and upright. She believed that the 3 obediences and 4 virtues were the duty of every woman, and that women should be gentle and obedient. Arrogant, domineering women were her pet peeve. So when I ran into Shenrong, and happened to catch sight of the Grand Princess who hadn't left the Imperial Garden yet, I lowered my posture as much as possible, putting on a perfectly obedient and gentle demeanor. In this contrast, Shenrong would only appear more arrogant and overbearing, and a noble consort as arrogant as her. Naturally, the Grand Princess would be displeased with her. No matter how much Zhu Chengxian doted on Shenrong, he still had to show deference to his own aunt in the end. That was why Shenrong was punished with 3 days of confinement to her palace. This was already quite a rare achievement. With Shenrong confined to her quarters, Zhu Chengxian naturally thought of me. He summoned me to his bedchamber. I was carried to the hall of mental cultivation, where he sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with a faint smile on his face, and reached out to caress my cheek. Wanna, her ladyship from Guanjua Palace just fainted. The imperial physicians have been sent for, your majesty, should you not go and see her? That eunuch I was already familiar with spoke up, forcing himself to bring up the matter of Guanjua Palace. The guilty look on his face made it clear that this was most likely a lie, but Zhu Chengshuan's eyes filled with worry at once. Rong'er has always been willful. Today, I punished her with confinement to her quarters. She's probably cried herself unconscious by now. Wanna, I'm afraid I understand. Your Majesty, I cut Zhu Chengxian off abruptly, then took his hand in mine, soothing him softly. The noble consort's health is the priority. You should go to her at once. Your Majesty, I'm perfectly fine waiting. My smile was gentle, as soft and considerate as ever, to the point that a faint flicker of dissatisfaction began to show in Zhu Chengshuan's eyes. But this dissatisfaction was not directed at me. I tidied myself up and returned directly to Tingxue Pavilion, seeing the look on my face. Boyun could easily guess that I had been stood up once again. Miss, why aren't you the least bit anxious? Now that we've managed to enter the palace, our top priority must be to share His Majesty's bed. The best outcome would be to conceive a prince smoothly, only then can we secure the glory and wealth we have now. I had said it before, having been reborn, I would take both their lives and the splendor of imperial favor. I haven't forgotten, of course, but the more he can't have me, the more interested Zhu Chengxian will become. I don't want just a moment of his favor. What I wanted was his entire kingdom. 9. Shenrong had obviously done all this on purpose, having stolen my chance twice in a row. She couldn't wait to come flaunt her victory in front of me as soon as her confinement was lifted. I told you long ago, this deep palace is no place for just any woman. No matter how beautiful you are, so what? I just need to snap my fingers. And you'll never get close to His Majesty's side. As she spoke, I was feeding the fish by the small pond behind Tingxue Pavilion. Even this infuriated her. She snatched the fish food from my hand and threw it all on the ground in a fit of pique. EWN, someone like you really is only fit to marry a beggar. Her mockery was undisguised, as if she was certain I would not dare to fight back, that my meek and submissive act was her favorite thing to see. But today, I had no intention of enduring it any longer, so I stepped closer to her, leaning in to whisper in her ear, so you love playing matchmaker so much, then perhaps I should return the favor someday. Since you're so fond of beggars, I'll definitely find you the very best beggar under heaven. How does that sound? Shenrong had never expected me to speak to her in such a sharp and cutting tone. After the initial shock, her face turned crimson with rage, and she raised her hand to slap me. I had been waiting for this. Just as she lifted her hand, I deliberately leaned backward, and before I fell, I made sure to hook her skirt with my hand, dragging her down into the pond with me. Behind us was the pond, not deep enough to drown someone, but more than enough to leave them choking and gasping for air. The noble consort had fallen into the water at Tingxue Pavilion. As soon as he heard the news, Zhu Chengxian rushed over without delay. At that time, I was in the adjacent room, changing out of my wet clothes. The door was suddenly kicked open. Zhu Chengxian, his face dark with anger, was about to start berating me when his eyes fell on the still unhealed scars on my back. He froze, and most of his rage dissipated instantly. I pretended not to notice the change in his expression, putting on an innocent and pure look as I walked barefoot slowly toward him, tears glistening in my eyes. Your Majesty, it hurts. My right hand had hit a stone, leaving a large, swollen red mark on my wrist, a sight that looked quite horrific. The last traces of anger vanished from Zhu Chengshuan's eyes. He dipped his finger into the ointment on the table, then gently dabbed it on my wound. You're so careless, falling into the pond with Rong'er like that. She's making quite a fuss about it. Zhu Chengxian said this deliberately, but I played dumb, clinging tightly to his sleeve and nodding my head repeatedly. The noble consort was just teaching this concubine a lesson. We were standing by the pond, perhaps the wind was just too strong. It was a flimsy excuse, to say the least, but in this moment, with my robes half undone, any further talk would have been nothing short of a buzzkill. Zhu Chengxuan's gaze grew increasingly dark and deep. He reached out to lift my chin slowly, leaning down to kiss me. "Your Majesty." That familiar eunuch spoke up again, always at the most crucial moment. This was the third time now that Zhu Chengxuan's trysts had been interrupted. The impatience in his eyes was unmistakable, but he still hesitated, choosing instead to push me gently away. Rong'a might not be feeling well. Before he could finish his sentence, I stood on tiptoe and kissed him, silencing his words with my lips. The air in the room grew increasingly warm and ambiguous. We pulled apart slightly, our foreheads touching. I stared into his eyes. "Let this concubine be bold for just one night. Tomorrow, I'll return you to the noble consort." What followed was the rustling of red silk curtains, as we surrendered ourselves to the haze of desire. 10. After successfully sharing the emperor's bed, I was promoted to the rank of noble lady, a fifth-rank concubine. When Shenrong heard the news, she threw another tantrum in Guanzhou Palace, making it known to the entire palace. Ever since Shenrong had entered the palace, Zhu Chengxian had doted on her excessively. The rest of the harem had long been neglected. The concubines had complained in whispers, but had no choice but to swallow their grievances. Shenrong's outburst was so severe that Zhu Chengxian hurried to comfort her, but this time, Shenrong was truly beside herself with rage. Even with Zhu Chengxuan's soothing words, she could not calm down. In her anger, she accidentally injured Zhu Chengxian, leaving a bright red scratch from her nail on his face. For a mighty emperor to be injured over a harem squabble, it was a grave loss of dignity. If word of this got out to the court, memorials impeaching Shenrong would pile up in the imperial study. Even among the common people, it would become nothing short of a laughingstock. Unsurprisingly, Zhu Chengxian was infuriated. He stormed off, turning instead to the palace of another concubine nearby, deliberately snubbing Shenrong in front of everyone. In the following 2 months, the scratch on Zhu Chengxuan's face refused to fade. His resentment continued to simmer, and he refused to see Shenrong. Instead, he took his frustrations out by lavishing his favor on the other concubines in the harem, and this had an unexpected consequence. Lady Lin, who had been out of favor for years, managed to capture the emperor's attention and soon discovered she was with child. It had been 3 years since Zhu Chengxian ascended the throne, and he still had no heirs, not even a single princess. There had been concubines who had become pregnant before, but they had all suffered miscarriages under mysterious circumstances. Later, with Zhu Chengxuan's undivided attention on Shenrong, the harem had remained quiet and barren for a long time. For an emperor to have no heirs to inherit the throne was a humiliation he could not bear to face his ancestors with. So when he heard the news of Lady Lin's pregnancy, Zhu Chengxian was overjoyed, immediately promoting her to the rank of Jiaoyi, a third-rank concubine. Shenrong, who had still been nursing her grudge, was so enraged by this news that she coughed up blood and fainted on the spot. After all, she was still the woman he cared about the most in his heart. When he learned that she had fainted and coughed up blood, Zhu Chengxuan's anger softened once again. He took the initiative to go to Guanzhou Palace to see her. Despite her fiery temper, Shenrong knew full well that all her power and influence stemmed from this man before her, and now, with another concubine pregnant, her position had become precarious. So no matter how much resentment she felt in her heart, she had no choice but to swallow it down, and soon enough, Shenrong regained the emperor's favor once more. Rumors began to spread quietly throughout the palace that Zhu Chengxian had already decided that Shenrong would raise Lady Lin's child as her own in the future. 11. This rumor grew more and more rampant in the harem with each passing day, and so, a few days later, Lady Lin paid a visit to Tingxue Pavilion. She claimed she had come just to chat as sisters, but her words were filled with nothing but sorrow and anxiety. "Ever since I entered the palace, I've never been favored by His Majesty. Now that I've finally conceived a child, I'm going to have to hand him over to someone else to raise. But I'm no match for the noble consort. What am I going to do?" As she spoke, tears streamed down Lady Lin's face. Looking at her, I could easily guess what she was really trying to say, so I smiled faintly and spoke up. "If you trust me, sister, I will never stand idly by and watch this happen." Her crying stopped instantly. She grabbed my hand tightly, her eyes shining with hope. You really mean it? You're willing to help me? I nodded, leaning in to whisper something in her ear. After that, I watched her leave. Boyun was busy having the servants tidy up the gifts Lady Lin had brought. My eyes fell on those gifts. I picked up one of the pearl necklaces, a cold sneer escaping my lips, as if to confirm my suspicions. That very night, Shenrong came to visit. As soon as she opened her mouth, she began to hurl insults at me, deliberately choosing to do so in a place where there were plenty of servants around to hear. I stood quietly, letting her rage. Noble Lady Yi, I know you've always been petty and vindictive, but you do well to remember your place. In this harem, hierarchy is everything. I am the noble consort, while you are nothing but a lowly noble lady. My gaze rested on her. She was dressed in an extremely luxurious and elegant robe today. Her hair adorned with all kinds of exquisite hairpins and ornaments, 2 sachets hung from her waist, and the pearl bracelet wrapped around her wrist was incredibly magnificent. I walked slowly toward her, then suddenly twisted my ankle, throwing myself directly at Shenrong. She was caught off guard, but luckily, the maids behind her managed to catch her, preventing her from falling to the ground. However, the pearl bracelet and sachets on her wrist were all accidentally pulled off and fell to the floor in the process. EWN, I know you did that on purpose. Shenrong was furious. I quickly knelt down to pick up the fallen items, handing them back to her respectfully. This concubine was clumsy. Please forgive me. Your ladyship, Shenrong, who had always looked for any excuse to pick a fight with me, surprisingly did not fly into a rage this time. She simply clutched the pearl necklace in her hand, let out a cold snort, then turned and left Tingxue Pavilion without another word. I watched her retreating figure until it disappeared completely from sight. Only then did I slowly pull my hand out from my sleeve. In my palm, there was another identical pearl necklace. 12. Palace Lady Lin invited me to the Imperial Garden to admire the newly bloomed flowers. I naturally did not refuse. After a little touch-up, I did not forget to put on some of the gifts she had given me a few days earlier, then happily went to the appointment. When Palace Lady Lin saw me, her smile was sweet and warm. I was worried you wouldn't like the jewelry I sent you, but seeing you wear it today, I know you truly understand my heart. I held the pearl necklace in my hand and smiled back at her. Everything you gave me, sister, are rare and precious treasures. I love them so much. Naturally, I had to wear them to show them off. Shenrong had taken a liking to strolling in the Imperial Garden every day recently, so when we ran into her by the pavilion, it came as no surprise. But just as Palace Lady Lin and I were about to curtsy to her, someone suddenly pulled me from behind. Though I had been on my guard, I still felt a jolt of panic, taking advantage of the sudden confusion, and since Shenrong was standing very close to us, I dodged the eyes of the crowd, stretched out my foot, and tripped her. In the end, several of us tumbled to the ground in a heap. The scene was chaos, especially Palace Lady Lin, who was pregnant. She seemed to slip on something, fell heavily to the ground, and bright red blood immediately stained her skirt between her legs. When the only pregnant concubine in the palace had an accident, Zhu Chengxian rushed over without delay. As soon as Shenrong saw him arrive, she immediately pointed at me and shouted, "Your servant saw it with my own eyes." It was noble Lady Yi who snapped her pearl necklace, which caused Palace Lady Lin to fall. At the same time, someone had already gathered up all the scattered pearls from the ground and presented them to the emperor. Palace Lady Lin's face was deathly pale at this moment. Tears pooled in her eyes, whether from regret or something else, it was hard to tell. She stared at me numbly, her gaze filled with hatred. "Noble Lady Yi, where is your pearl necklace?" Because of this question, Zhu Chengxuan's gaze on me was sharp enough to kill. I remained calm and unhurried, slowly taking out another pearl necklace from the sleeve of my other arm. Before the accident happened just now, I had intended to taste some tea, so I put my necklace away. I do not know why the noble consort insists on framing me, but these pearls are definitely not mine. You dare to quibble? Shenrong roared angrily, then pointed at the pearls on the tray, her tone icy with severity. "This necklace was a gift from Palace Lady Lin to you. She knows it best. How could she possibly mistake it for someone else's?" I let out a cold laugh. right in front of her. I picked up one of the pearls from the tray and held it up for everyone to see. Such fine quality pearls, according to the palace's rank regulations. Only someone of your ladyship, the noble consort status, is entitled to wear them. As soon as the words left my mouth, Zhu Chengshuan's eyes immediately fixed on the pearls. Though they looked very similar at first glance, upon closer inspection, one could still spot some subtle differences. In particular, each of these pearls on the tray was incredibly valuable, and there were records in the palace only concubines of the rank of noble consort or above were allowed to wear pearls of this quality. Above the rank of noble consort, apart from the imperial noble consort, who rarely left her palace, the only other person qualified was noble consort Shenrong. And the pearl necklace that Palace Lady Lin had given me was right there in my hand at that very moment, so if someone was to be blamed for this, how could it possibly be me? The evidence had been presented by Shenrong herself. Earlier in the imperial garden, the scene had been complete chaos. No one could tell who had pushed whom, or who had snapped the necklace. All they knew was that someone had slipped, someone had fallen, and there were many small pearls scattered on the ground. I looked at Zhu Chengxian. Your Majesty, pearls of this quality are something I could never possess unless they were a gift from the noble consort herself. But it is well known throughout the harem that the noble consort and I have never gotten along, therefore, I had no chance of ever receiving such a gift from her. Shenrong finally realized what was happening at this moment. Her face turned flustered, but she still held up the necklace in her hand. How dare you falsely accuse me like this? Noble Lady Shen, the truth is, my necklace has never left my person for a single moment. I looked at her and suddenly burst into laughter. 13. The farce of that day ended with noble consort Shenrong being accused of plotting to harm the imperial heir, and demoted to the rank of palace lady. After all, a noble consort who was extremely fond of luxury, who insisted on having only the very best that the palace had to offer. Yet the pearl necklace she held in her hand was of the kind that ordinary concubines would wear, a fact that was completely beneath her status and utterly illogical. So if there had to be a culprit in this matter, how could it possibly be me? The pearls belonged to Shenrong. Palace Lady Lin herself had no idea who had pushed her. She only knew that there were pearls scattered on the ground. Therefore, the only possible culprit was Shenrong. Because it had been her who had snapped the necklace in the first place. When I returned to Tingxue Pavilion, Boyun closed the door of my bedroom behind her, then collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as if she had narrowly escaped death. Miss, this time it was far too dangerous. I stared at the pearl necklace in my hand and couldn't help but nod in agreement. A palace lady who had never had any dealings with me before, whose rank was higher than mine. Even if she wanted to find someone to stand up for her, she would never have turned to me. She should have gone to Shu Ruoxuan, the imperial noble consort, the only person in the palace whose status was higher than Shenrong's, yet she had come to me instead, putting on a show of being wronged and vulnerable, even gifting me with many precious things. It had been suspicious from the very start, and Shenrong had shown up on the very same day, saying things in public that were clearly meant to make everyone think that I, a mere noble lady, had been disrespectful to her all along. And at her waist, she had been wearing a pearl necklace that looked similar, but was made of completely different materials. With so many coincidences piling up, how could I not have been suspicious? So I had deliberately bumped into her, taking advantage of the wide sleeves of my robe to cover my actions. I had quickly swapped the necklace Palace Lady Lin had given me with hers. Then, as we walked through the imperial garden, I had let Shenrong yank the necklace right off my neck, and I had already had another necklace in my possession, one that I could produce immediately to prove my innocence. As for the broken necklace that had fallen to the ground, it was naturally a priceless treasure that only someone of the rank of noble consort like Shenrong would be allowed to wear. Palace Lady Lin and Shenrong had teamed up to bring me down. I had naturally not sat idly by and waited for my fate to be sealed. Instead, I had turned their plot against them, resulting in the current situation, with the crime of plotting to harm the imperial heir hanging over her head. Even if Shenrong was still the emperor's favorite concubine, a thorn had already been planted in Zhu Chengshuan's heart, and if she wanted to remove that thorn, she would have to do something drastic. So when I learned that she had ordered the imperial household department to make her a new riding outfit, I knew exactly what she was planning to do. Master looked into it before, Boyun said softly, her eyes darting toward me from time to time. This clever little girl had naturally also noticed that something was amiss. He said that the emperor and Shenrong first became close during a hunt. Shenrong was brave and valiant, and when they were suddenly attacked by assassins, she had thrown herself in front of the emperor to shield him, taking a sword strike for him. That was what made the emperor feel so deeply for her. Ever since then, he has often taken her out hunting with him. Out of 10 hunts, 3 would be ambushed by assassins, and every single time, it was Shenrong who would throw herself in front of him, getting injured but never killed. That is why she became more and more favored by him. Using a life-saving favor to win the emperor's pity is indeed a clever trick. I nodded, my eyes suddenly turning cold and vicious. In that case, let us see if Zhu Chengxian will still love her once he learns the full truth of what she has been doing. Everything unfolded exactly as I had predicted. When the emperor went on his hunting trip, many concubines from the palace accompanied him, including Shenrong. Of course, she had only just been punished recently, and Zhu Chengxian had not been in the best of moods because of it, but seeing her in her riding outfit, he still couldn't help but think of all those past moments when they had faced life and death together. Once again, a feeling of pity for her welled up in his heart. So when the hunting began in the afternoon, Shenrong rode her horse right beside him. Even though it was supposed to be me accompanying the emperor that day, I sat on my horse, my posture unsteady since I was not very skilled at riding. Shenrong saw this and laughed openly. Since noble lady ye cannot ride a horse properly, why must she insist on overstepping her bounds? Be careful you don't get thrown off and lose your life. As she spoke, the malice in her eyes was barely concealed. I met her gaze with a hint of provocation. Though your servant is not good at riding or archery, accompanying His Majesty on his hunt is still my duty as a concubine. So she should not even think about getting rid of me today. Shenrong looked angry, but then she seemed to think of something. In the end, she suddenly relented, a faint smile spreading across her brows. She said, in that case, noble lady ye come along with us. Looking at the way she was looking at me, I knew she was up to no good. So when the assassins finally appeared, the look in Shenrong's eyes as she stared at me was one of triumphant glee. She intended to get rid of me here once and for all, and with perfect justification. I naturally would not let her have her way. I had known exactly what she was planning to do today, so when the assassins raised their swords and charged at us, I moved first, shoving her aside and throwing myself in front of Zhu Chengxian to shield him. An arrow grazed my shoulder, and the pain made my face turn pale. And Shenrong, whom I had just pushed off her horse, was completely exposed in front of the assassins. If they had been ordinary killers, they would have immediately raised their swords and slit her throat. But instead of attacking her, the assassins were actually afraid that the horse's hooves would trample her, and went out of their way to shield her from harm. It was such an obvious move, Zhu Chengxian could never have missed it. 14. Back at the camp. The imperial physician hurried over to treat my wound, but when he took my pulse, he discovered that I was pregnant. I had been injured saving the emperor's life, and now I was carrying his child. Zhu Chengxian was filled with both gratitude and joy, and pulled me tightly into his arms. Wanna, it was my fault for not protecting you properly, perhaps out of guilt, or perhaps because of the child I was carrying. He immediately promoted me to the rank of concubine Ronghua, the 4th rank. After the imperial physician finished bandaging my wound, Zhu Chengxian sat by my side and stayed with me the entire time. The attack by assassins was a serious matter in itself, and with me being pregnant on top of that, the Grand Princess, who had accompanied us on the trip, naturally wanted to come and see how I was doing. I sat on the edge of the bed, my gaze fixed directly on the entrance to the tent. A light breeze blew from time to time, allowing me to catch glimpses of people walking by outside. When I saw that familiar figure approaching, I spoke up softly, as if talking to myself. Your Majesty, how did those assassins suddenly show up out of nowhere? At this moment, Zhu Chengshuan's eyes were only for me, and with me being pregnant, his tone was unusually gentle as he replied, there have never been a shortage of ambitious traitors in this world. I nodded in agreement. Your servant did something wrong just now. In my hurry to save your majesty, I accidentally knocked Palace Lady Shen off her horse, causing her to fall and get injured. Luckily, those assassins still had a shred of humanity left in them and did not harm her. Otherwise, even if I died 1,000 deaths, I could never have atoned for my mistake. If one listened carefully, my words sounded like a confession of guilt. Yet it was utterly illogical. An assassin who had resolved to murder the emperor, who had brutally slaughtered all his attendants, had spared the delicate Shenrong alone. Worse still, he had even hesitated to proceed with his assassination because of her. Thus, when the Grand Princess entered the tent, she spoke directly to Zhu Chengxian. Your Majesty, this matter demands a thorough investigation. No matter who it implicates, the crime of plotting to murder the reigning sovereign must never be condoned. 15. With the Grand Princess overseeing the case, Zhu Chengxian could no longer conceal the truth, no matter how badly he wanted to, and so, all the sordid secrets hidden in the shadows were exposed in the wake of this assassination attempt on the emperor. Shenrong was summoned to the commander's tent that very night. It was not long before heart-wrenching sobs echoed from within, and everyone outside began to whisper among themselves. Enduring the pain in my body, I carried the pastries Boyun had just made and headed for the commander's tent. I happened to hear Shenrong's hysterical cries. The thought that all the affection he had once cherished for her had been nothing but her elaborate scheme, that even the life-saving grace he had valued so highly was merely a ploy to gain his favor, turned Zhu Chengshuan's face ashen with rage. I stood outside the tent, staring at the sharp, jagged stone beside the steps for a long while before finally stepping inside. At the sight of me, the harshness on Zhu Chengshuan's face softened slightly. Shenrong, of course, already knew I was pregnant. Her gaze was filled with venomous hatred as she looked at me. I deliberately avoided the eyes of Zhu Chengxian and the Grand Princess, then shot her a provocative glare. Setting down the plate of pastries, I prepared to take my leave. You vile woman, go to hell. Behind me, Shenrong suddenly spun around and charged at me like a madwoman. At that moment, I feigned a stumble and fell forward. Boyun, ever quick-witted, grabbed me and pulled me out of the way just in time. But Shenrong, caught off guard by my sudden movement, lost her balance and tumbled down the steps. Her once beautiful face crashed directly onto that sharp stone. Blood gushed forth instantly. Shenrong was already guilty of conspiring to murder the emperor. Now, she had even colluded with assassins to attack him, all in a bid to eliminate her rivals and monopolize his favor. No matter how much Zhu Chengxian wanted to protect her, he could not ignore the deepening scratches on his own face. His pride would not allow it. To make matters worse, she had deliberately tried to harm me, only to bring disaster upon herself and destroy her own face. Looking at Shenrong's blooded, disfigured visage, Zhu Chengxian finally found it in himself to be ruthless. Shenrong was stripped of her title and reduced to a commoner, condemned to spend the rest of her life imprisoned in the cold palace. 16. Due to this unexpected turn of events, we cut our trip short and returned to the palace ahead of schedule. Shenrong was now a disgraced prisoner, her face mangled and untreated. As a woman with such a kind heart, I could not bear to watch her bleed to death slowly. I sent someone to deliver medicine to her, saving her life. But that medicine came with a terrible side effect. It would cause her wound to fester, making her once beautiful face even more hideous and grotesque, disfigured and ruined. Shenrong was no longer the moon in the sky she once was. To Zhu Chengxian, every time he looked at her now, all he saw was a monstrous face that filled him with disgust. His feelings for her had long since turned to dust. Boyun, has he been sent into the palace yet? I gently caressed my 5-month-old belly. I had been promoted to the rank of imperial concubine, and with Shenrong gone from the harem, Zhu Chengxian showered me with all his favor. Yet I often urged him to be fair to all the concubines, earning me the gratitude and respect of every woman in the palace. Boyun nodded. His legs have been broken, and he's been castrated. He's already been sent to the cold palace to keep Shenrong company. Zhong Da, the man I hated with every fiber of my being. In my past life, he had killed my father, then betrayed and killed me. This time, I would never let him escape his punishment, Boyun added. But it seems Shenrong hasn't recognized him yet. I smiled. It was exactly as I had expected. For all her high-minded talk about equality, Shenrong had always looked down on the poor and the lowly from the bottom of her heart. So I would make a beggar her servant, to torment her day and night. Zhongda, that man who had been forced to marry me in my past life, was a twisted monster at heart. Now, it was time for Shenrong to taste the same suffering I had endured. 17 years passed in the blink of an eye. I gave birth to the only prince in the harem, and was elevated to the rank of noble consort, second only to the empress in the palace hierarchy. Shu Ruoxuan and I became close friends. I learned that she had been in love with a young man since childhood. That was why, ever since she entered the palace, she had been taking various medicines to keep herself in a constant state of frailty, all to avoid being summoned to the emperor's bedchamber. As for the woman in the cold palace, there were times when Zhu Chengxian would think of her, and even consider paying her a visit, but every time he reached the gate of the cold palace, the sight of her mangled, almost unrecognizable face would make him retch violently. Shenrong watched the emperor who had once sworn to love her forever now look at her with undisguised disgust. In that moment, all hope of redemption died in her heart. Hatred, festering day by day under Zhongda's ceaseless torment, finally consumed her entirely. I looked at my 6-year-old son. As the only concubine in the harem to bear a prince, my power and influence grew stronger with each passing day. Boyun, it is time to bring this to an end. I stared out the window at the dark, oppressive sky. It filled me with an unbearable sense of unease. I did not like this feeling, so it was time for everything to end. 5 days later. The heavy door of the cold palace was pushed open by an unseen hand. The now completely deranged Shenrong, clutching a dagger in her hand, stumbled out. By a cruel twist of fate, she ran straight into Zhu Chengxian, who was standing alone nearby. Lost in thought, driven mad by hatred, she charged at him without a second thought, plunging the dagger deep into his chest. The wound was not immediately fatal, but it was mortal. Shenrong was quickly apprehended by the imperial guards. Zhu Chengshuan's life hung by a thread. In the harem, I now held the authority to oversee all palace affairs. Moreover, as the mother of the crown prince, I was the only one with the right to pass judgment on Shenrong. Inside the emperor's bedchamber, Zhu Chengxian lay on the bed, his face as pale as a sheet of paper. In these final days, I had attended to him personally every single day, never once leaving his side. I was the very picture of a devoted and obedient wife. Zhu Chengxian knew his end was near. He took my hand and made his final arrangements. Wana, when our son ascends the throne, you will become the Empress Dowager. Ruoxuan's health has always been fragile. Promise me you will treat her well. As for Shenrong, that woman has lost her mind, but we did share many years together. Grant her a cup of poisoned wine, and let her die with some dignity. I did not speak immediately. Instead, I finished feeding him the medicine prescribed by the imperial physician before finally answering him. Elder sister Ruoxuan has lived a lifetime of melancholy. She has always loved someone else. Yet for the sake of her family's honor and your scheme to balance the power in the harem, she had no choice but to enter the palace. She is a poor, unfortunate woman. I will treat her well. I will personally send her out of the palace, help her change her name and identity, so that she can spend the rest of her life with the man she loves. As for Shenrong, how can a mere cup of poisoned wine ever quench the hatred in my heart? She has always prided herself on being noble and pure. So I broke her legs, cut the tendons in her hands, and carved the character whore onto her body over 100 times with a knife. Then I threw her into the beggar's den in the dilapidated temple east of the city. But this is not the end, not by a long shot. After all, I hate her so deeply. She must die by my own hands. And then there is Zhongda, that man who brought me unspeakable pain in my past life. I found the most agonizing poison in the entire world and forced it down his throat. The poison made him itch so badly that he scratched every inch of his skin raw. But I refused to let him die quickly. I kept him alive, trapped in a living hell of endless suffering. Day after day, his festering wounds became infested with maggots. Until he finally died a slow, miserable, and horrific death. I smiled. Looking directly into Ju Chengxuan's increasingly terrified eyes as I slowly rose to my feet, I whispered to him, just like now, she was reduced to a broken doll by me, begging on her knees for mercy. But I reached out my hand and wrapped it around her neck, just as I am doing to you now. I squeezed harder and harder, until her last breath faded away. As I finished speaking, Ju Chengxian, lying on the bed, gradually stopped struggling. His body went limp. I released my grip and used a silk handkerchief to wipe the grime from my hands carefully. It was perfect. I had finally killed the last of my enemies with my own hands. Ju Chengxian was dead. My son ascended the throne as the new emperor, as the Empress Dowager. With a young child on the throne, I naturally assumed the regency and began to govern the state in his stead. Not long after, Shu Ruoxuan passed away from her long illness. In the mortal world, a simple, ordinary couple emerged, living a life of love and contentment, and I had fulfilled the oath I had made so many years ago. Glory and power were mine. The lives of my enemies were forfeit. Years later, I accompanied the emperor on a royal tour of the country. When we reached the region south of the Yangtze River, we happened upon a wealthy merchant's daughter throwing a silk ball to choose her husband. The scene was lively and joyous. This time, no one came to ruin the celebration. The merchant's daughter, blushing shyly, tossed the silk ball into the crowd. It landed squarely in the hands of a newly crowned top scholar who had just returned to his hometown. Their eyes met. The merchant's daughter smiled bashfully, and the scholar looked back at her with a gentle, handsome smile, and so, the world gained another pair of lovers bound by destiny.